Hi, so today I'm going to talk about the film Predestination with Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook. Now, this isn't a review in the strictest sense, but it is worthwhile watching the film. One, to support it, two, to get an idea what I'm talking about. If you want to go and do that, feel free, I'll still be here. If you do want a review, I may have found one, in which case there'll be a link in the description. If I haven't, then I'm sorry. I can only do so much. But basically take this as your spoiler alert, and if you want to continue, let's go. So, brief overview of the film, because it's, even if you've seen it, it's worthwhile just revisiting it. A guy is a time agent sent back to stop a bombing in the 70s. Meets someone who goes by the name of the unmarried mother, writing real confessional stories. Tells Ethan Hawke basically the life story, which also involved them originally being born as female, as far as they were aware, under the name of Jane, after being left on the steps of an orphanage, and then transitioned to male after, in fact, giving birth and finding out they were intersex. So they had to basically kind of cesarean it and, unfortunately, dispose, I guess, of the female parts. So, quite a sad moment, and handled quite well, I might say. So they're kind of, taken under the wing, once their sad tale is really laid out, and end up basically, as far as it appears, assisting in stopping the bomber. Then comes the big reveal, which really, I have to be kind of critical and say, well, I kind of started to figure it out quite early on, in fact. But the big reveal where the person who Jane met when she was younger was in fact John, i.e. herself after the operation. Which kind of makes it very complex. Also the fact that the baby was kidnapped, we find out that Ethan Hawke did that in fact, and then took that baby back to the orphanage. So their baby, John and Jane's baby, is Jane, if you will, upon deposit at the orphanage. Then, of course, we have the fact that Ethan Hawke, at the start of the film, had to have facial reconstructive surgery. Before that, he was John. So, John, the bartender, is deposited at an orphanage, grows up as Jane, has child after meeting John from the future, starting to sound like a Terminator film, then gets changed into John from the past, if you will, meets the bartender who is John from the future further, tries to defuse a bomb later down the line, gets face scarred, becomes Ethan Hawke, who then goes back and takes the baby from Jane to the orphanage. It's really a very interesting and bizarre set of circumstances. What does it mean, though, from a point of standard time travel rules, if you will? Well, arguably, John, Jane, the bartender, they're a paradox. And they're a perfect paradox, in the sense that any one tiny change suddenly rewrites everything and they don't exist. But if they don't exist, they couldn't have rewritten the change. So therefore things must happen the same way, and therefore they must continue to exist. They're in their own loop. It's a perfect fixed loop. And of course the big killer is towards the end of the film, when Ethan Hawke's kind of just living out his life. He's been retired by all accounts, and meets an older version of himself who is actually doing the bombings. Again, I kind of saw that one coming. Who says the wonderful line, "If you kill me, you become me." Now, by that logic, this older version is remembering that he killed another older version. It's a little loop. And then went on to the path of, actually, the world's pretty broken, maybe we just need to bomb it and start again. But if he doesn't kill him, obviously the bombings continue, and he still loses out. But really, to become the Fizzle Bomber properly, he has to kill him. and thus that cycle itself also continues, which also feeds the original cycle, because he wouldn't have been going back in time to try and stop the Fizzle Bomber if he didn't become the Fizzle Bomber. It's very intricate, yet also beautifully simple. It's not hard to follow, and I apologise if I've made it sound a lot more convoluted than it is. This is why I've said watch the film. Watch it all pan out properly. But it's just so interesting how at no point can anything change. Because if that happens, that whole time bubble, really, that's it, implodes in on itself. Or worse than that, perhaps completely destroys the entire fabric of the universe. We don't know what happens in a paradox. None of us have lived through it, as far as we're aware, because that would close the time loop. But it is just so beautiful. Like I mean, when I first watched it, I was sitting there kind of going, what if that changed? No. What about that? No. What about that? No. And I was constantly trying to second guess it and say, is there a way of this not happening? And there isn't. It's, as I say, it all feeds itself. Without the bartender just listening to the unmarried mother's tale, let's take it from the start of the film rather than a chronology of anything else. Without him doing that, he wouldn't be there to recruit them to be a time agent who would then go back and listen to the tale. You see, that loop on its own, there's these little loops on their own, but also they're all part of the big loop, and that's part of the beauty of it. Everything just wraps up together, and it's so strange. And the other weird element, of course, is the fact that without anything else, they don't exist. They are a human being, quite clearly, but they're a human being who has no other ties to humanity. If you look at it as a rather than just a loop, but actually kind of concentric circles, each time that the baby's deposited, if you will, being a new generation, John and Jane are the parents, and Jane is the child, if you will. Which of course explains how it all works as well, because they have the exact same genetic material, perfect clone. Okay, we're taking out any potential chance of mutation, but that obviously isn't happening. So that keeps rolling down, and as I say, that generational thing keeps happening. And to the credit of the film, and unfortunately this is where I cottoned onto the idea. The song is, I think, played on a jukebox, and Ethan Hawke also kind of sings a little of I Am My Own Grandpa. That was a clever move, but also a dumb move if you're trying to keep the reveal, if you will, entirely secret. Unless it was just left there as like a breadcrumb for the more attentive, I don't know. But I got it then, and I just chuckled to myself. I was like, yeah, this is probably the case. And technically, if you take that generational idea that I gave, it is the fact that they are their own, well, dad, grandpa, great-grandpa, etc. If you take every circle as its own iteration, however, it's looped, so it's not a different iteration, and there are no parents or grandparents. It's just a continual cycle of this one human who exists without any external influence. They are created, not born in the usual sense. You can't do a family tree, because that family tree is composed just of them. And as I say, just the genius of it, of how, if anything, of how the filmmakers have made sure that they haven't left any huge loops. I think that's a credit, really. Any little loopholes that would completely make the whole thing fall over would ruin the film, and I don't think the film was ruined. Now, like I say, if you haven't seen it, do so. I gave you a warning at the start, and I'm telling you again. Watch it. It's thought-provoking, interesting, funny, and deals with a person having to undergo a transition that they didn't want. And the sort of sadness with that on a, totally different to the whole time travel element. But that also handled well. It does everything well. Some things it does really well, some things it's a bit sketchy. Nothing's perfect. But yeah. And if you've already watched it, then I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you did, leave a comment. And I'll know if you've come to the same ideas anyway, or if you think there's any little loopholes. Let me know. And until next time, of course, as always, take care.